Welcome to Simply Chic by V, episode 4. On this episode, I'm going to be talking about my pregnancy and my birth story, a little bit about PCOS, and a little bit about postpartum. As always, Alessandra is right next to me. I am in her nursery and she's in her crib right here, smiling, and she's standing in her crib, believe it or not. So here's some little updates about her growth. She's 7 months now. She is standing. She went from army crawling to being able to almost crawl on all fours. She would shake back and forth. Took some little crawling steps, but really just kind of gave up on that because she discovered that she can stand up. And ever since she discovered that, that's all she wants to do is stand up everywhere all the time. And boom! She just like fell onto the couch, onto the mattress. She's fine. She's also super adventurous. She is fearless. I love her, but she scares me a little bit. Not gonna lie. I'm pretty sure, okay, mark my words and let's see where we're at in 2 months, but just at the rate that she's standing and wants to stand so much and like move around, I think she'll be walking by 9 months, which is crazy to me. ¿Qué pasó, mami? Sí, estoy hablando de ti, mamá. Yeah, sí. So a few of you have asked me in the past to share with you about my pregnancy and my birth story. But to kind of go into that, I feel like you need to know a little bit about my past and my history. At the age of 15, I actually had a surgery on my left ovary to remove a cyst that had become really, really large and then ruptured, and actually also had blood in it. So it had hardened, and it was kind of like a little blood clot that was on top of my ovary. At the time going into the surgery, it was really scary because the doctors had told my mom that it would be possible that I could lose an ovary, and I was just 15 years old. So how did we lead into that? For years, getting my period would always be extremely painful, to the point that I literally felt paralyzed of how bad the pain was. I would experience really, really sharp pains, and when people would ask me to describe it, what I would tell them was that I felt like there was 2 knives that were just like stabbing me in my ovaries and then trying to like lift me up, which sounds crazy, but that's really how I felt. I'll never forget one time in high school. It was so embarrassing. We were in the middle of midterms or finals. We were taking an exam in my Spanish class, and I started to have really, really bad period cramp pain. And I was sitting there taking the exam, and the pain started shooting just like up through my back, down through my legs, to the point where I really felt paralyzed. If I moved my finger, the movement of my finger literally had shockwaves of pain into my ovaries. It was brutal. And I'll never forget, like, the students started looking at me like, are you okay? Because I was like paralyzed, and I was just like bawling. Like tears were falling down my eyes, and I could not move. And they were like, Miss, I don't think Valeria's okay. Like something is wrong. And the teacher literally thought I was trying to scam and get out of the exam, but I was literally dying. So they had to call an ambulance. They had to take me to the hospital. It was this whole thing. By the time I got to the hospital, apparently I had a cyst, and it had ruptured by the time I had gotten to the hospital. And after that is when they started doing all this follow-up. And I basically would create a lot of cysts, and my periods were really painful. I was getting my period at this point also twice a month, which was really difficult because imagine I was getting it so much pain all the time, and my periods lasted 7 full days. The first few days were the worst, and it was just brutal. It was heavy, it was painful, and I was just kind of dealing with that. At the time, we're talking about in 2005, 2004. So at the time, I was still a child. So I was being diagnosed and seen by pediatricians. I was going to Miami Children's Hospital for all of my follow-up appointments to monitor all the cysts that I was having. I would get ultrasounds, pelvic ultrasounds every few months. It was pretty bad. But at this time, they would not give me a diagnosis. Nobody ever told me what was wrong. They were just like, you're having cysts, you have a lot of pain, that's it. And it's just because PCOS has been diagnosed and established later in life. So it wasn't really until I was like in my 20s that a doctor told me the words PCOS, which stand for polycystic ovarian syndrome. So at the time of my surgery and all of that, that wasn't a title, or I didn't really have a diagnosis. It was just, this was like what was happening to me, which was scary, made me feel very not normal. It was strange. I was super young when other doctors would talk about it. They did say that it was strange that at such a young age I had this issue. And because of this, because I was getting my period twice a month, because I was producing so many cysts, because I was ovulating often, all of the doctors literally told me at like 14, 15 years old, and they're like, you need to be very careful the day you decide to be intimate because you have a very high chance of getting pregnant. But in the same tone of this conversation, they were like, but you also need to be aware that because you are so fertile right now at 14, you're not going to be a woman in her 30s easily able to get pregnant. And that just stuck with me for so many years. So let me explain a little bit about the science of that. Basically, we're born as women. We're born with all of our, not fertilized, all of our eggs that we're ever going to have to be able to have children. There's no way to know this amount. It's hundreds of millions of thousands, I don't know. It does range differently on different women. And in every period and cycle, you do release these eggs. That's the whole point of a period, right? So you get your period because you didn't get pregnant, and then we release these eggs that did not get fertilized. Because I was having a period twice a month, I was losing double the amount of these eggs and every time I had my period. So one of the things that the doctor suggested after my surgery and all of that to regulate me was to get on birth control. So that way I could have just one period. Hopefully my periods would be less. The pain would also be less. And I did do that. And in the beginning it was rough because I had to switch like 3 or 4 times the different medicines. What's wrong, Mama? ¿Qué pasa? She already stood up. She stands up every 5 minutes and then she like sits down and stands up again. She just wants my attention. Yeah. So she made an appearance. Alessandra is here with her cute little bow and her little bunny. Mami, tú tienes que jugar, okay? Para que mamá haga su podcast. Yeah. She's looking at herself in the camera. How funny. So in the beginning of getting on birth control was really difficult because I had to try about 4 different medicines because one would make me super sensitive. The other one would break me out. Then I was like gaining weight. I would be super moody. It was difficult. Then I found a pill that regulated me, didn't give me too many side effects, and I got on that. I had my surgery at 15, like I had mentioned. Thank God they were able to save my ovary when the doctor went in and did their surgery. Again, I was having a surgery done at a children's hospital, but because it wasn't common for that procedure to be done on children, the doctor that came in was actually an OBGYN. Okay, Pasha. The doctor that came in was actually an OBGYN, and he came into Nicholas Children's Hospital to do the procedure on me, which was like a whole other complicated thing in its own. At the time, I had to actually stay in the hospital 5 days after the surgery for recovery because it was pretty like intense. They didn't cut me open too big. It was just 2 little incisions, but they had to like fill, mind you, I don't know if this is the correct scientific terminology, but this is how it was explained to me. They had to fill my belly and my uterus with like air so that they can have space so that then they can work in there with like microscopically. And so then after it was really hard to sit up, to do anything. Even if I was like passing gas, it hurt so much. It was pretty painful, but it was mainly because my stomach was so like blown up, which was crazy because I looked pregnant. I was 14 years old. So yeah, so that was crazy. That was the whole experience. Thank God they were able to save my ovary, which was great. But after that, I got on the pill so that I could regulate myself and not have such bad period pains. And like I said, it was a journey because it took a while to finally get the right medicine. And once I did, I was feeling better. But it was still, compared to other girls and friends that I would talk about, like my period was so intense that once I was on birth control, it was more like normal. It was never light or easy or painless. So I went from having a 7-day period to having a 5-day period. Days that I couldn't get out of bed because I was physically so sick and so ill and like literally in so much pain, or that I wanted to throw up from how bad the pain was, to being able to function but still having pretty bad cramps and needing to take medicine. This was the other issue, is that typically women take ibuprofen, right? Midol, Motrin when they're on their period because it helps with inflammation and swelling, and that's the best medication that every doctor recommends. Well, I am allergic to ibuprofen, so I could never take that. So the second strongest medicine that would do something was naproxen. Tylenol didn't do anything. I literally popped 800 milligrams and I was like still having the exact same pain. So naproxen was the only thing I could take. Post-surgery, they had sent me naproxen straight up like prescription. But over time, they had to lower the doses, and then they obviously could not give it to me anymore because it's very strong. But Pampers started making sorry, I'm going to put her back in the crib. Pampers started making a pill that had some naproxen in it over the counter, and that's what I started taking, and that worked really well. As being a teenager and not being super responsible with how I take things, I used to always take my medicine when I had pain, regardless of whether I had eaten or not. And this is really strong medicine. And over time, I ended up giving myself gastritis because I was basically taking this on an empty stomach, which was not good. I started taking that and I ended up giving myself gastritis because I was taking this medicine on an empty stomach, which is like a whole other. And then over time, you know, they gave me some other medications. I stopped taking the medicine that way. I started regulating a little bit better the way that I would take my medicine, and the gastritis eventually went away, thank God. But I just always kind of lived this lifestyle of being on birth control. So I was on birth control for many, many years. By the time I was like I think by the time I was like 21, 22, I had kind of made the decision that I wanted to get off birth control for a little bit because I had been regulated for a while. My period felt very manageable, and I was just not so in love with the idea of the fact that I had been on birth control since I was 15 years old. I felt like that just wasn't like good for my body, especially because I was like a young girl developing, and I just felt like I needed a break. So I did so, and I got off of it, and I think I like survived well for like 6 months. And then after 6 months, my period started coming back. Brutal. Like just as painful, just as long, just as heavy, all the crazy symptoms. I still didn't really want to get back on birth control because I told myself that I had wanted that break. But then another 6 months went by and I just couldn't deal anymore. I was just dying. It was affecting my life. I couldn't function. I had to stay in bed sometimes. I had to call out from work. It was a major issue. So I decided to go back on birth control, which is what I did. Then while being on birth control for another couple of years, I was in a relationship, and then I was on birth control again for a couple of years. And about the age about like 24, I want to say, or 25, I had gone to my doctor, and they had basically said that I was having kind of all the same symptoms of like having a lot of cysts and having problems, because I was having also like, I was having breakthrough bleeding through my pill, and like a bunch of things were happening in my body that were just not normal. And it was the same medicine I had been on for years. Nothing had changed. I didn't understand why I was going through all of that. When all of that was happening, they basically told me, with a bunch of exams that they did and all these things, that I kind of needed to decide sooner rather than later if I wanted to have children, because my window of opportunity was getting much smaller. And this was really scary for me at the time because I just wasn't in the right relationship or place to really have kids. But I've always known that I wanted to be a mom. So I was really scared. Yeah, mama. I was really scared that if I just didn't make that decision of going ahead to try to have children, that I was going to regret it, because later in life I wasn't going to be able to. So that was really emotionally difficult place for me for a while. I honestly prayed about it, and I was just like, you know what, God, you know what's in my heart. Like, I want to be a mom. You also know where my life is right now, what I'm going through. Like, that it's just not the right time. It's not the right situation. So at the time, that just didn't feel like the right decision for me. And after praying about it for a while, I honestly had felt like God had told me that, you know what, like, you are going to be a mom. And it's just, it may not look the way that I wanted it to look. It may be different, but that purpose, like, he was going to fulfill. You know, I truly believe what God puts in your heart, your desires, he knows them, and he's the one who put them there. So they will come to pass. And that's something that I held on to in scripture a lot during all of that time. And I just moved forward with that decision. And then I didn't really make any changes because there wasn't really a lot of changes that I could do. And that was a decision that I made, which was basically to not have children, because there wasn't anything else that I could do at the time. My doctor didn't want to change my medication again, just because I had already tried all these other ones, and we already knew what worked and what didn't work. So when you have PCOS, the best birth control is the pill. You can't really take any of the other things because they're not really good for you. And this was the time that I had, around the time that I had actually gotten diagnosed as PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And because it was like a fairly new diagnosis, I feel like there was a lot of evidence and information that was coming about. So a lot of doctors weren't just kind of like super well informed about how to treat it or what to do. I just want to say, this is literally why the people that say that like when you have a baby you can just work from home with your baby, those people don't have babies. Like, it is so difficult to get things accomplished when she needs me all the time and wants attention all the time, right, mama? Yeah, I know. So at the time, because PCOS was just kind of a fairly new diagnosis, there wasn't that much that doctors were kind of like telling you to do or do differently. So in that situation during that time, it was a little bit strange. So I didn't really get told what to do differently other than, hey, kind of jump on the opportunity to have kids now or you may regret it, which was like the craziest, darkest news that I could hear. And mind you, I had already been knowing since I was 15 and had that in my mind that like I had to be a young mom, be a young mom, be a young mom. And life doesn't just always work that way. And I was very aware too that I didn't want to just have kids to have kids or like end up having kids with anybody. I really wanted to fall in love, have a healthy relationship and a healthy marriage and have children. That was like the way I wanted things to happen for me. So that was a decision that I had made. And I honestly at the time felt really at peace about it. About a year or two passed. I didn't do anything different. And after really changing kind of my mentality and accepting that it was okay, that God would eventually bless my desire to be a mom, however he was going to do it, all of the cysts that I had and all the issues that I was having with my ovaries just literally cleared. And my doctors could not believe it. I didn't have them burst because I didn't have pain. There wasn't like liquid residue. It was literally like a miracle. It was crazy. And the doctors would tell me after, they're like, I don't understand. They're just gone. Like they all dissolved, disintegrated. It was like a whole thing. Because they were scared that I was going to need to have like another surgery and all this stuff. So when that also happened, I knew that I had made the right decision. I was even more at peace with everything that happened. By the time that actually everything had resolved, I had actually finished the relationship. I gotten out of the relationship I was in, which also felt like a crazy blessing. I was like, how crazy that I'm fine now that I'm not in this relationship. And it just gave me more peace of where I was in life and like at the time and my age. And of course, I was just getting older and still in relative times, I was young, but for like my body, when people had told me as a teenager, I felt like I was super old because they said, you know, in your 30s, you're going to be like a woman fertility age of like 40. Because at 15, I was like a woman's fertility age of like 20. So it was still something that like, you know, I wasn't in a rush for, but I always had that concern in the back of my head. And then fast forward a couple of years, I was single. Then I met someone, my husband. And at the time, this also story is super funny because I realized I don't think I haven't told it. There hasn't been that many podcasts. And not that many people know it. So it's a really long story, but I'm just going to like give the spark notes of it. So at the time, I ended up working part-time at the same company where my husband was working. And my cousin's husband was the manager there. And then 2 weeks after he had hired me, he quit. So I thought, I was like, okay, well, I'm kind of done working here, right? Because he was like helping me out, whatever. And he had quit. And then the company had promoted my husband into that position. So when I had mentioned to him, I went to him and I mentioned like, hey, like, you know, do you guys still need me? Because, okay, mommy. So when I had mentioned to him, I was like, okay, do you guys still want me around? Because I understand that like if you don't. And he was like, no, yeah, of course. Like we do need the help. Like you can stay. Then so I stayed and we kind of just started to build this co-working relationship. We got along super well. We always would hang out, have lunch together. We would just chit chat. I was not in a place really looking for a relationship at the time. I was still in my singleness. I was like, I would even like talk about like my past and my past relationships and what I've been through like publicly because there was other girls in the office and I would chit chat. You know, it's loud space and like obviously he would hear, like, in my mind, zero did I think like anything of possibility with him. And then time would pass and just like we got along more and more and more. And even people in the office would be like, oh, you guys like click so well and you get along, like you guys should date. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then like I started going home because I lived with my mom at the time. And my mom would tell me the same thing. She was like, hey, like you talk about him all the time. You really admire him. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was just in pure denial. And then I started to realize he did have an interest in to like me because he started asking me out, but not directly. He would ask me out on like company things. So like the company we worked for used to have tickets to go to like the Heat game to give their customers and clients. So he would offer like, let's go. Do you want to go to Heat game with like, you know, other people from the office and this and that. And I was always like, oh no, I'm busy. I can't. I have other things. And I genuinely did have other things going on because I kept my life pretty busy and felt like it was friends and I had different things going on. But of course, I could have made the time. I just didn't because one, I was just like, he's my boss. Two, I was like, he was younger than me. He is younger than me, and he's 6 years younger than me. And at the time that we started dating, the time we started dating, he was 21 and I was 26. I was like zero, like interested to be with a 21-year-old. I was like, you're a baby, you're a kid, like you're in your own phase, like. She just farted super loud. And then he just was persistent. And then my mom kept telling me, like, you know what? You admire him. There's all these things you like. Like, you don't have to marry the guy. Just go out on a date. And lo and behold, we got married. But I decided, okay, I'm going to listen to my mom. And I'm going to go on this date and give him a chance. And then, like, we started going out. And I did start to really like him. And I think it was, like, literally date 2 or, like, something very soon. I basically laid out all my stuff and I was like, listen, you're young, I'm older, I'm like, I want to have a family, I want to get married, I want to have kids, like I don't want to waste time because I was 26 at the time. In my head I was like, if I'm gonna have kids, I need to hurry up. And I wanted to be with someone like that I got to know, got to be married with for some time before I just rush into having children. Like I wanted to build that life with them. So I was like, I can't, like, we don't want the same things. And he was like, no, like, he's like, okay, like, first of all, he thought I was crazy. That I was like, he's like, it's like our second date. What are you telling me? And then he was like, all right, let's take it step by step. Let's see how this goes. And I was very like, all right, I get that. But at the same time, like, I was checking in every so often because I was like, I do not want to fall in love with you and then you rip my heart out. And I do not want to do the same to you. Like, I don't want you falling in love with me and we're not in the same place. And then I'm like, all right, peace out, bye. Like, salud, mama. So lo and behold, like, he was really mature for his age and he was very committed and he was ready to have that. He also saw and knew that I wasn't trying to like rush into that. I wanted to like build the foundation first. But I was very clear with what my intentions were. And in Miami, let's be real, like that's just not the main normal vibe. Like I feel like people here date to like fool around or play around or like have a good time. And I was like, I'm dating to get married. Like I'm dating to find a spouse, to have a future, have a family. Like I've been there, done that, like had the life. Well, that sounds crazy. That was not me. But I had already like been in a relationship, thought that was going to be where my life was going and it didn't. And like, I just wasn't going to like waste time just dating someone else. For that, I'd rather have been single. Well, things worked out obviously great. And we ended up dating, I think it was like 4 years, and then we got engaged, and then we got married, and now we've been married almost, oh my gosh, in October it'll be 2 years married, which is crazy. I was very transparent, and we have always talked about, you know, things. I shared with him, like my diagnosis and all these things, and when we first started dating, I was a little bit scared because I genuinely agree and believe that every person has every right to want to have their own children of their lineage, right, of their blood. And I think it's important if there was any chance that that was not going to be the opportunity that they should know. So I had this conversation with him because I told him, I'm like, listen, this is my situation. I'm not saying I can't. No one has said that I can't, but there is an possibility that maybe by the time we're ready to have kids, it may be too late and it may not happen for me. And he was because thank God he's super wise. And he was like, listen, like, let's just live in the right now. When that comes, like, we'll deal with it. I love you. Like, it'll be fine. We'll go through this together. Like, he was like he grounds me. And I'm like 30 steps in like the future of like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And that gave me a lot of peace of mind also to know that. But so flash forward into like, okay, we decided we're going to get married. We're going to have a family. We're going to do all the things. We got married, and the conversation was that I had already been going to my OBGYN. I had already been talking to her, because at one point I literally went in when I was dating him, and I told my doctor, I was like, listen, I need to freeze my eggs. Like, I'm getting old. And I didn't want to rush the process. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't going to lose the opportunity to have this regret. Mind you, I'm telling you my story. This is not necessarily the case for everybody, and every situation is different. Check with your doctor and your OBGYN and whatever is going on with you. But this is what she told me. She at the time was like, listen, you are still relatively young. I understand that you have PCOS, you have this issue. I understand and I see that you are in a relationship, that you want to have a family and have children, and he wants to too. So she told me, she's like, I don't suggest freezing your eggs, because the rate of IVF being successful is like between 20 to 30%, which is very low. And even though it's also very low, it's also very expensive. She's like, you actually have a partner that wants to have children with you soon-ish, and it'll be easier. And there's other medical procedures that we can do once you're actively trying together, and we can do testing in that, then having to do a whole retrieval of an egg, get it fertilized, and put it back in you, like that, those chances are much lower than the opportunity that you have. So she's like, listen, that's not what I would suggest for you to do. She calmed me down. She suggested for me not to freeze my eggs at the time. So then I had asked her, because I already wanted to be 30 steps ahead, and I was like, okay, perfect, no problem. I want you to test me to see where my fertility levels are, because that is something that you can do in today's technology and science and testing. She then, because she's a great doctor, was like, listen, I'm not going to do that. And I was like, why not? This is what I want, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, the reality is that fertility, why can I not say that word? So the reality is that fertility levels are always changing in your body. So if she was going to do testing on my fertility levels at that moment, that I was not actively trying to have a baby, because at this point we were just dating, it was irrelevant, because she said that my levels could go up or down severely from month to month, depending on whatever hormonal changes my body was going on. I was still on birth control. Whether I got off birth control would have been totally different at the time. So just logically didn't make up. Okay, yeah, time out. Okay, she just literally needed a nap. Oh my god, she just woke up. So I'm talking, and she woke up, but then she closed her eyes. She's napping, so I feel like I'm gonna have to talk like this for the rest of the podcast, because I have the whole setup here and I literally can't take it away. So literally, I wanted to test my fertility levels. She explained how that's just not relative right now at the time. It doesn't make sense, because it can change depending on whether I get off birth control, when I get on. Every month is different. So like, me finding out that my levels were high or low, she's like, that's only going to mess with your mental health, and you're not even ready to have a baby right now. And that's not something that I want for you, or that's even healthy for when you do try to have a baby, because in your mind, you're already going to have this kind of blockage and stress of whatever that may mean. If your expectations are going to be too high because you are high, or they're too low, it's just not going to be something that's healthy for you. And I appreciated that so much, that she thought further than I did about my mental state of being over this diagnosis. I also had told her, because she's been my long-term adult OBGYN, and I had also chosen her because the day I want to have children, she came highly recommended. She also specializes in a lot of kind of situations like what I have with PCOS, and she does like a lot of, she's very like pro vaginal births, and like that's all the stuff that I wanted. So that's why I chose her as a doctor, but she had already known my history for many years as an adult. So she also was telling me, like, listen, this is like what I think is the best thing, and then once you're ready, then we'll talk about it. Because I have a history of PCOS, for me, she told me that if and when we are trying for 6 months and I don't get pregnant, then we can start looking at treatments and what to do, because of my previous history. Typically, for any people with zero conditions or history, it's a year of trying before they can go and do any further kind of testing and stuff like that. But she told me, because you have PCOS, and once you're ready, just, you need to give yourself some time, and be very aware that it'll be very easy for you to wait for you to take at least 2 years before getting pregnant. So my type A clinical brain takes this like, as is on paper. Like, okay, 2 years, it's going to take at least 2 years. So this is my conversation with Nico at all times, right? Like, okay, it's going to take 2 years. Like, I want to have more than one. I also don't want to be much older because, then you get into higher risk and all these things. So I was like, listen, like, we need to get married as soon as we're married, blah, 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 whatever. So once we got married, I was like, all right, how soon are we going to wait? Because I'm like, if it's going to take 2 years, I don't want to keep wasting time. And then we could have like been trying sooner. You know what I mean? So this is what we had decided. We had decided we're going to wait. We got married in October. We're going to wait until the new year. So in January to like, for me to get off birth control. And then we were just not going to be careful. Like, right, we're just not going to use protection. We're going to use birth control. And if in 6 months we didn't accidentally get pregnant, then we were going to then actively try. And then we would go see the doctor if nothing happened then. So that was like the goal, right? And that would put us at like at least a year of marriage trying, which in my head, I thought if it's super fast, it'll be a year. If it's normal, like she said, it'll be 2. And then in my head, I'm like, and also if it's super hard, it could be longer. So this is what I'm thinking the entire time. So in my head, I'm like, okay, like, yeah, I'm getting off birth control and whatever, but I just didn't think I was going to be able to get pregnant. So I get off birth control in December. So that January will be my first like ovulation, right? Like off the pill. Well, like, let me clarify that. So like December was my last month. So January I was off. And okay, like it's my first period off birth control. And it was like normal considering that I was off birth control. And what I mean for that is like, I had mentioned to you guys like before, right, on birth control, I have 7-day periods, super heavy, very painful. That's my life. On birth control, I have 5-day periods, heavy 2 days, the rest are very light, pain for 2 days, like not severe that I can't get out of bed, but like significant cramping that I need to take medicine. But like I can manage it, but like in my head, I'm like, I'm walking, like I'm fine. And then like the last 3 days are like fine. So my first period off the pill felt like my period on the pill, which I thought, right, normal, because my body's still like letting go of all the hormones and blah, blah, blah. And again, also people that don't have PCOS that I hear all the time, just like average healthy people, say that when you're on birth control to get off, like at least 3 to 6 months is like what you need to get off birth control so your body can regulate and like get back into a cycle to get pregnant. So in my head, I was like, okay, no problem. It's fine, whatever. February comes around and I was feeling like a bit off, but not because of my period. I just had like, I don't know, just feeling off. And my cousin was like, you need to take a test. You're pregnant, you're pregnant, pregnant. And I was like, there's no way, girl, I'm not pregnant. Because I wasn't feeling anything that made me think I was pregnant. But she just felt a vibe, she says, like, right? So I was like, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. And I wasn't even like late. I was like, this was like in the middle of like, I had nothing to do around my cycle. Like, I'm like, you're just crazy. So then I get told the news that my dad has a heart attack. And I like, obviously my world was like ending. I was super stressed. Thank God today he is healthy. He's fine. But at that moment and that time, it was like very chaotic and stressful. And that's all I could think about. And then like a week after that, I get told by the company that I've been working for that they were closing the US division, which I ran. And that was devastating because one, I loved my job. I was really happy. I was feeling really fulfilled. I was passionate about it. And two, even though it's not related, but related, like my dad had just had a heart attack. So I was like, this is too much like heaviness at the same time. And because like, it's a company that had like a whole division in the US and whatever, like I had to, like I wasn't just losing my job and that's it. Like that day I had to like help close it. So I was gonna know for like a month. I had a month to like do all this stuff to like help close the business. So for like a month I was gonna be working in a job that I knew that I was no longer gonna have. So that was also like a mental like stressor. And I also had my last like travel job, like an event that we were doing, because we still had commitments we had to fulfill. Like it wasn't just like whatever. So I had flown to Houston and I did this event. That was the event. If you've been following me long enough on social, you'll know that's the event where I ended up getting robbed. I used to like, the company was a jewelry brand. I used to sell jewelry and I did all of like the business development for the jewelry. And at this event, they stole like thousands of dollars of this jewelry. And I wanted to die. I was like, how can this be? Also, like the company's closing. Like I already know this. They already told me, and like this happened. I honestly, it was super mega stressful. I was super hard on myself. I was so stressed. Like the trip was like a disaster in itself. Like just so many things that like it was tough. It was honestly, it was really, really tough. Of course, I like had to do a police report, do all the things like I wanted, because I also wanted to finish out my job like well. Like how can this happen to me now? It was just so chaotic. Like 3 weeks. So of course I was stressed out of my mind. My cousin is still telling me like this whole time, she's like, take a test, take a test. I'm like, take a test, nothing. I'm like, I'm just so stressed. Look at my life. Like this is why I'm not feeling well. This is why I'm off. This is why all these things, whatever. Also, PCOS, a lot of the symptoms you get for your period or around your period are very similar symptoms of when you're pregnant. So I've always felt this. So I didn't think it was strange, even though she thought it was strange, right? And like just a million things, like headaches, my boobs are super sensitive. Like I was having cramping, even though I hadn't gotten my period yet, which is why I thought I was gonna get my period, because I would always cramp before. I would have PCOS, I'm PCOS, PMS, I was super hormonal, like all of these things. So I was like, it's normal, it's normal, it's normal. I come back from my trip from Houston after this whole thing fiasco. And my cousin's telling me, take a test, take a test. And I was like, no, you're crazy, whatever. Low key, I'm like, okay, maybe she's right, but there's no way. I was like, and at this point again, I was super in denial. I was like, there's no way I don't feel like I'm pregnant. She says this to me like when I get back, it's like 2-3 days passed. At this point, I had already missed my period. But again, I was stressed and I've missed my period millions of times on and off the pill from stress. So I was like, there's no way that has nothing to do. I'm not pregnant. It's now the 5th day that I am late for my period. And I'm like, there's no way, whatever. I get up to go to the bathroom in the morning and I'm nauseous. And I was like, hold on. I get nauseous and I throw up from my period because of the pain. Like if the pain is so bad that I like throw up, and like that's normal for me. But I hadn't gotten my period yet and I hadn't had pain. So this nausea was not related or didn't fit into the way that I got my symptoms. So when I felt nauseous, I was like, oh my God, can it be? There's no way. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get a test. I'm going to buy a test. At this point, it was already nighttime because I spent the whole day in denial. Like, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. I buy the test at night. I tell Nico about it. They always say that the morning pee for tests for pregnancy is the best. So I tell them, okay, we'll take it in the morning. I'll take it in the morning and we'll find out together. So I wake up at like 5 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. And Nico's like dead asleep, but I'm like, hey, I'm going to go take the test. And he's like, okay, no problem. I go to the bathroom and I go to pee on the stick. And literally the instant my pee hit the stick, the 2 lines came up. And I was like flabbergasted. I looked at it and literally told myself, I was like, no, this is a lie. So I turned it over. It says you have to like wait 5 minutes. I turned it over and I was like, I put it on the thing and I was like, I put a timer for 5 minutes. I'm like, Valeria, you don't know what you saw. You're wrong. You saw something wrong. You're hallucinating. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. There's no way you saw 2 lines. I'm again completely telling myself that I am in denial, full on, like, no. So I'm like, okay, waiting, sitting on the toilet waiting, and I'm convincing myself that like I'm wrong, that I didn't see what I saw. And then the alarm rings. I turn it over, I look at it, and those 2 super bright lines are on there. Pink. That means you're pregnant. I literally start bawling, crying. Why? Right? I've always wanted to be a mom. I'm super like excited, right? To be pregnant. What a miracle. Like this should be the happiest moment of my life. But I was just so overwhelmed because I wasn't expecting it. I thought I was going to have 2 years, at least a year after like getting married. my dad had just had a heart attack. At this point, I didn't really know how okay he was going to be. Like, yeah, he survived it, but what does that mean for his life, for his finances, for his life? Like, at this point, he hadn't even moved to Georgia to retire yet. It was like a lot going on. And I had lost my job. And now I'm pregnant. And I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to like function? Who's going to hire me pregnant? Like, just, it was so crazy how all of the super dark heaviness was the first thing I felt. And I was just so, I was crying because I felt so defeated. And then after I had all those instant feelings, I then instantly continued to cry because I felt guilty that I was feeling that when all I ever wanted in my life was to be pregnant and to have a baby. I almost feel like I'm gonna cry right now, which is a little crazy. Whatever. So, because I felt so ungrateful, I'm like, how can I be feeling this? So then I go running. I wake up and he's in bed. I get in bed and I'm like, hey, wake up, like we're pregnant. And he's like, literally also in shock because he was waking up like, what? He thought it was gonna be like negative, that I was great. Like, of course, so did I. Like, why? Whatever. And he's also still like asleep. Then he's like trying to be super logical and loving and like whatever. And obviously, as a girl, I'm like all about emotion, and he's just like taking it in. And I'm like, freak out? Like, what do you mean? And he's just not a freak out guy. And I was just like, oh my god, whatever. And like I wanted him to like be anxious, but obviously like I didn't, but I did. And he just was like trying to be calm. I'm sure like he was anxious about it too. This crazy news, we weren't expecting it. We just processed totally different. So then I had my freaked out. He tries to calm me down and like be reasonable and blah blah blah. And then he just goes back to sleep. And I stayed up like the rest of the night. Like I couldn't go back to sleep. What are you talking about? My eyes were like this. I was like processing everything. And because there was so much tension at the time in my life with everything that was happening, I didn't want to tell anybody. I was so scared because then on top of everything, and there was again so much negativity, I was also scared that I was like, what if it's a fluke? What if it doesn't last? What if I lose the baby? What if I have a miscarriage? I just can't handle one more like bad story thing to talk about with people, my family. And like I also have a super large family. So I also feel like if I told one person, I had to tell the other person was gonna tell the other person. And there was no like keeping this like there's no such thing. So to keep it small. So I was like, you know what, like let's not tell anybody. I really just, and Nico respected that and he agreed, like, okay, yeah, like let's wait. And at that point too, like when I had called my doctor, they tell you at the OB/GYN that to wait until you're 8 weeks, technically, right? To like go in for the appointment. So when you think 8 weeks from when your first missed period. So I just missed my period 5 days. So when I had thought it was gonna be 8 weeks, I made the appointment, and then we had said, oh, either way, we'll go, we'll see what they say, and like after kind of that, we'll decide like when we'll tell people. So we do that, right? And during the stage 2, it's so funny because like until then I hadn't really felt like I hadn't felt anything, and then that day I felt nauseous. Forget it. It was like nausea, throwing up every day. I couldn't brush my teeth at morning or at night. One time I threw up in the shower. One time I was driving and I threw up driving, but I like swallowed. Sorry, disgusting. I know, but it was bad. I like had to pull over. I started crying. I was like, "What is this?" I was doing grocery once, and like it happened, and it was just the nausea was really rough, and I was just super extremely tired. I would take naps in the middle of the day. Like it was just so tough. Um, so I waited like that to get to be 8 weeks, right? And to make the appointment. So I was able to finish out like my work and all of that, which honestly it helped a lot that I had that month to finish out working because it took my mind off of it a lot in the beginning of like the stressor of it. So then we go to the doctor and I'm expecting, right, to like them tell me like, oh, whatever they tell you, like, oh, you're 8 weeks and this and that and blah blah blah. And like the lady literally goes to do the ultrasound and she's like, this is not an 8 week baby. And I was like, what? And she's like, no. And she's like, you're 13 weeks. And I was like, what do you mean? Like what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, like this is not your first missed period. This has to be your second. And I was like, there's no way. I had a period last month in January. And she's like, no, maybe it was like implantation bleeding or whatever. And I was like, and in my head, I was like, there's no way because that didn't feel light enough for me, right? That felt like I had a 5-day period, all these things. But then she also like told me, mind you, this is like the ultrasound tech lady. she was like, yeah, but that's also relative because everyone's flow and cycles are different. So maybe, right, for a normal average woman that doesn't have PCOS, that doesn't have the periods that I have typically, a 5 day period seems like a lot or like normal. Um, and mind you, it was 5 days, but it was also really late every single day. I never had like a heavy day, but I had it for 5 days. So that's why I thought in my head, I'm like, I had a period. Well, apparently, compared to like what it would be for me, because it wasn't like that and it was really light, that was like implantation bleeding for me, and that was not a period. So I was 13 weeks pregnant. So doing the math, that literally means that I got pregnant on my first ovulation off of birth control, which is like the most mind blowing thing ever. Because in my head, they were like, you're not going to be a woman in your 30s easily able to get pregnant. It's going to take you 2 years to get pregnant. Every woman on birth control has to cycle out before like they start ovulating well. Like all of these things that people have told me for years. And like here I am like, boom, no, first try, like you're pregnant. At this time I was already 33. And I was just like, I could not believe it. And then literally when she told me that, I started crying. But this time my crying was joy because I literally was like, in that moment I realized like, what, I'm gonna cry again. Hold on. In that moment I realized that like what's meant to be is gonna be, and what God has for you is for you, and no one can take that away, and it's gonna be on his timing, no matter how much we think we want it before or after, sooner or later. Like it's just, it comes when it needs to come. And at the time I was like, man, like how can I be losing my job at this time? Like it's so crazy. But honestly, like things worked out the way they needed to work out, because I had a tough, like it was healthy, but I had a tough pregnancy in the sense that like I was napping 2-3 hours in the middle of the day. I literally would be like, I would have lost my job. Like I couldn't really function. I was feeling so sick all the time. Um, and I had talked about at some point also like when we had the baby, if I would take time off to like be with the baby, is really ideally what I would want to, like, you know, stay at home as much as possible as life permitted financially and all of that. So it was just seemed like it was happening a little sooner than I thought. Also with my dad's situation at the time, obviously he's so much better now and things worked out, but I was also like, you know, kind of like, wow, maybe this is like for the best so that I can be around family more, like all these things, right? Um, and it just really made me like cry, because it made me realize like it doesn't matter what diagnosis you've gotten. God has for you what he has for you, and that plan is perfect. And doctors can be wrong, is what I'm trying to say. Like, yeah, there are things and they're smart and studious and they've learned, but there are miracles and there are things that just happen in this world that are unexplainable. And genuinely, like, I share my story a lot, and this is why I want to share my story, because it just, it doesn't mean it's impossible. Just because there's so many like odds against you doesn't mean it's impossible. And even then, I was already okay with like the odds, and I was like, all right, it's gonna take time and this and that. And I had this whole strategy. Again, I'm very type A. Like I wanted to organize and plan everything out, and it just didn't happen that way at all. It was like a surprise. So I felt so blessed, that it was kind of crazy. So at this point, we realized we were more farther along than I thought I would be, and because of that, I was just like, all right, let's see like when this first trimester ends, because you know I literally didn't know anything. I had to like educate myself. After that I became like obsessed with like reading books and seeing videos and tutorials and all these things, and YouTube and TikTok and whatever. Like I became very educated on like pregnancy, motherhood, babies, blah blah blah. And even then, like I'm 7 months postpartum now, like you're still always learning. If you think you know, you don't know, like things change all the time, for sure. So at that point I was like, you know what, I think the results, and we still have to do like, you know, blood work and this and that and other tests and like find out all these other things. I'm like, I think it's best that we just don't tell people until the first trimester is done, because that's like when it's safe, right? The first, I don't remember the percentage exactly, but there's a really high percentage of miscarriages happen in the first trimester. So I was just like, and things in our family and things that had happened were still kind of like a little chaotic and all that. So I was like, you know what, let's just wait. And then when we did the math and stuff, it kind of was going to be around Easter time. So I was like, oh, this will be perfect. We'll tell everybody by then. So we told our family like 1 or 2 weeks before Easter. And we told them like to not share with anybody, which whatever. That's like, our family's like 80 people. Like, share with who? But whatever. We're like, just don't post it on social media. Don't do all those things. So we waited to tell like everyone else on Easter. Which I have a video of that if you want to see it on my reels on Instagram. I mean, my highlights on Instagram of how I told everybody, and then the gender reveal and all that stuff. So then we told everybody. We did the blood work for the gender reveal, and we did a gender reveal party, which was super amazing. That was also very funny because so Nico's family is very male dominated. The majority of the guys, the people in his family are men. On my side of the family, we're all girls. Like, it's just crazy how many girls we are. But in all the research I've done, I've learned that men are the ones, like their genes are the ones that dominate the sex of the baby. So that determine the sex of the baby. So in my head, I was like, oh, we're going to have a boy, 100%. Because like, what are the chances are super high that we're going to have a boy. So we decided to do a gender reveal. We did it at a park. We got the letter from my OBGYN. We didn't open it. We gave it to his secretary, and she ordered the poppers that we wanted to use in the colors that we needed. And like, we kept it all like hush hush, but like nobody knew, only her. Because we also wanted someone neutral. Like, we didn't want to ask anyone in the family because we wanted it to be fair, that like no one in the family knew. So that's why we had her do it. And then we were at the park that day, and you obviously have to open it out of the box. And like, the one we had ordered was like streamers with powder. And because of that, I was scared that we would know when they opened it, the powder like leaked through. So he asked his cousin to do it and set it up on the side, which thank God we did, because he said that some of the powder did come through. So thank God we asked him, because some of the powder did come through, and he was able to actually see before we popped it, the color. So he knew right before. So whatever. So then when we pop it, and when we see it's a girl, I was in genuine shock. I was super happy. Nico was literally like, he couldn't believe it. And I laughed because he even told me after, like, the reason he couldn't believe it even more is because when the items got there on the label from UPS, it said blue-green. And from where we ordered it, like, the colors were 2 colors in one. So the pink was like pink purple, and then the blue was blue-green if it was a boy. So he swore that he had seen the label name on it. And I was like, there's no way. I had taken all the stickers off, whatever. And then later, like, down the road, he got another package from UPS, like, after all this had happened. And on the UPS label, it says blue-green. So I guess it's part of the UPS coding. It's okay, Mama. But he swore that it had to do with, like, the actual poppers, which is so funny. But obviously, I was super excited because I had told Nico, like, I don't see myself not having a daughter. Of course, I would want a son and I'd be happy regardless. But I was like, at some point, I need to have a girl. So I was like, get ready. Like, we keep trying unless we don't get the girl. But he was super happy. He's like the best girl dad ever. And I obviously know, and he's told me, like, he's like, oh, same, he wants a boy. Like, he's like, so hopefully, like, when we have the second, like, it's a boy. If it's a girl, he's like, we're trying again. Which we both want really big families, God willing, permits and everything, you know, we could afford it. But so he wants a boy eventually too, which I obviously get and understand. It'd be amazing to have the pair because that's super cute. But I also think there's nothing more beautiful than a girl having a sister. So I'm down for whatever for the next one, whenever that happens. So after that, my pregnancy still had like some little hiccups, I guess you would say. One of the things is that I have been anemic before because of PCOS. So it wasn't strange that I had low iron levels. And they were actually so low that I couldn't just take pills for it. I had to get a iron transfusion, which I had never heard of before. But my doctors wanted to make sure and do it as a precautionary step, just in case I ended up in a C-section, because my reserve was so low, like the count, that they wanted to make sure that if I did have surgery or if I lost too much blood, I would be okay. And that's the reason she recommended for me to have an iron transfusion. So I did that. And then the little girl decided to breech herself at 36 weeks. She was facing down the whole time, and then she flipped. I really wanted to have a natural vaginal birth, and so my doctor offered to do an ESV. ESV, I think that's what it's called. Whatever, to flip the baby back to her original position. and be face down. My doctor has a good history of this. She's done it quite a few times. So she felt that I was a candidate for it and I was up for it. So we did this. I also really wanted to not have an epidural for it because she says that most people, she recommends for most people to get an epidural with it. I just wanted to have control of my body. I didn't want to get an epidural. I was already taking hypnobirthing and breathing classes online, and I just felt confident enough that I could do this. She told me and gave me the option too. She's like, listen, we can start. And if you're feeling like you can't do it, then we'll just give you the epidural. So we're like, that's fine. When I asked her all of the information about doing the flip, if it was healthy, secure, if she recommended it, like all of the information, she was like, listen, only 1% of babies end up in an emergency C-section. She's like, there's like a 70% rate, like chance of that flipping, which at this point, 70% sounded like positive to me. That's higher than 50, and nothing is ever 100%. So I thought that was good and a higher chance for what I wanted because I didn't want to end up in a C-section. So we decided to like go for it. So we scheduled it. We go in, we do all the things. They prep you like basically you're going to go to the hospital, and you go to the hospital, but they prep you like if you're going to have surgery and just in case like you have an emergency C-section, all these things, blah, blah, blah. And we went in and we decided to do it, and they started the process. My doctor came in. It was pretty uncomfortable and painful, but I pushed through it and I was able to focus and concentrate. She was flipping her, and then her heart rate started to like go up and she was in distress. So she calls in and she's like, okay, emergency C-section, the baby is in distress, we gotta go. They put me on the stretcher. That whole moment was super chaotic. Yeah, ¿tú te acuerdas? ¿Tú te acuerdas de ese momento? Poor Nico, like freaked out because like they literally left him in the room. They took me. It was like this whole thing. And as I'm going into like the room to like have this C-section, I just know that I start to control my breathing. I try to get really calm. Of course, I was nervous, but I was like, if I'm not calm, it's gonna only make her heart rate even higher and be more in distress. So I was like, I need to try to get as zen as possible. I was literally like praying. I had worship music listening while I was doing my flip initially. So I kept it on. They had my phone there. They took it with me, even though it wasn't like on the bed. And lo and behold, my doctor was like, listen, like until like we're gonna keep checking. If her heart goes down, we're gonna stop the C-section. We're not gonna do it. And I was like, all right, I'm literally on the operating bed. Like all the things are like on me. ¿Qué pasó? And my doctor's like, hey, her heart rate's back down. She's good. And I was like, oh, hallelujah, thank God. Like I was super happy. So at this point, I'm like, okay, she's staying like that. We're done, right? And my doctor's like, listen, let's check to see if we finish doing the flip. At this point, I was like, no, like whatever's healthier. If I end up having a C-section, I have a C-section, like it's fine. And she checks and like she flipped. So she ended up going like head down. I think the best thing that actually happened in that situation, ¿Qué pasó, mama? ¿Qué pasó? Was that I didn't have the epidural, because when they were putting me onto the bed and all that process, I had full range of my body and my legs, and I kind of put myself onto the bed. I think that movement of me moving like that actually really helped her get in position and stay flipped face down. So if I would have had the epidural, maybe she would have not flipped if I would have moved. That was a crazy experience. When I came out, the nurses and staff that day and everyone helping me was so amazing. It was really cute because when I came out, one of the nurses offered, like, she's like, do you want me to take pictures or videos of like your husband seeing you like coming out? Because at this point, he literally thought I was having an emergency C-section. So that was the case, whatever. We come out and then they see me and he sees me and he's like super happy because they hadn't told him yet that like nothing had happened. The poor guy, he was like pale. He was like freaking out. But everything ended up okay. It was good. We were happy. My doctor was like very confident that I was going to be able to give birth without an epidural. She's like, listen, you did this. You can do labor. Like, you'll be fine. It'll be all good. So that was really like all of the pregnancy journey. We're getting to the end where I'm hitting 40 weeks. She hasn't come naturally. My doctor schedules me to get an induction at 40 weeks and 3 days. But I really did not want to get induced because I knew if I got induced, I was going to take extra medicines and things that were just going to like that were just going to make my labor and delivery faster, but also more painful. And that's just not what I wanted. So I was hoping that she would come naturally before. So I asked my doctor if she was willing to do a membrane sweep, and she did. And within 24 hours or 12 hours, she did it like during the day, in the middle of the night, my water broke. And we went straight into the hospital. And what sucked is that once I was in the hospital, they were kind of like just waiting to see if I would dilate, but I wasn't dilating fast enough. And the thing is that once your water breaks, you can't be more than 24 hours with your water broken. Because if not, you can get an infection and you have to get a C-section. So they were like, hey, listen, we need to do you, we need to give you Pitocin. And I was like, oh, the dreaded word. I hate it. I did not want to get Pitocin. My theory was like, well, if I'm getting induced, I want to get the pill or I want to get the other little thing that they stick up there, whatever. But Pitocin was like my last resort. But because my water had broken, they couldn't put anything in my cervix because I'm prone to get an infection. So it had to be Pitocin, which is done through IV in the vein. So whatever, I got Pitocin. I tried really hard to like push through it. A lot of the hypnobirthing classes that I took, see, mama, had all kind of mentioned like, hey, it's okay if things don't end up going like the natural way. Like obviously they try to prepare you as much as possible and that's what you want, but they also keep you very realistic, which I loved. I don't remember right now the YouTube that I use in her course, but I will put the information here and then in the caption on the podcast, so you guys can follow her if you really want someone who's really pro hypnobirthing and natural births and all the natural way, but is like scientific based and like understands the needs of like going to a hospital and having a doctor, even though she does like at home stuff too. But I feel like she's a very middle ground doula, I would say. I got the Pitocin and I tried really hard to see how much I can stick it out without getting an epidural, because I also didn't want to do the epidural because I wanted to prove to myself that I can have this natural birth, blah, blah, blah. So I'm 4 hours in with the Pitocin and I'm literally at this point dying. I was doing like all the techniques and all the things and I was going through the pain. What was happening is that the pain was getting significantly stronger and stronger, and the contractions were getting closer and closer. So I couldn't recover from the first contraction when the next contraction was already coming. And I was sitting on my birthing ball and I was like bouncing on it and Nico was helping me, giving me support. And there was like 2 moments where I almost fainted because I was like trying to breathe through it and get into the next, like get ready to survive that contraction, and the next one would come in and I couldn't, like I'd lose my breath. I couldn't do it. And when that happened, obviously I got scared, he got scared, and I'm like, listen, it's not smart. I'm like, don't want to end up in an emergency C-section. The smarter thing is for me to get the epidural now. They also had warned me to not get it too late because then it's like more difficult towards the end to do it because the contractions are really bad. So I was like, okay, I should probably get it now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have them check me because they can't check you as often because your water broke. It's not safe. So I was like, I'm going to have them check me because in my head, I was like, I had been laboring at this point more than 4 hours, but it was 4 hours with Pitocin. And I swore that I was going to be like 8 centimeters because I was going to be super dilated. When I went in, I was 1 centimeter. So I was not dilated at all. But my water had broken. And when your water breaks, you have to go right away. So I swore that I was going to be 8. She checks me and she's like, you're only 4. And when she told me I was 4, I was like, oh, forget it. Give me the epidural right now because I cannot make it. In my head, I thought if I was 8, I was going to rough it out and get to the end and be able to do it. But no, I was not able to do it. So they come to give me the epidural. And of course, because I'm in so much pain and the contractions are so fast back to back to back, I couldn't relax. The guy kept telling me, the anesthesiologist was like, relax your shoulders. He was like literally pushing my shoulders down like super hard, like relax, relax. And I was like, I'm relaxing. And I really wasn't. The pain would come and I would like get tense up and then they would try to put it in. And because I was getting tense and I couldn't do it, they had to do it twice because literally the first time they pinched me and everything, but like it didn't go through because I was too tense. So thank God they got it on the second time, which was like literally a miracle. I couldn't believe it. And it worked. After that, once I had the epidural, I was like smooth sailing. It was like literally fine. I also really appreciated that they actually let Nico stay in the room, which I have heard. I've actually never heard anyone have their partner or husband be allowed to stay in the room during an epidural. Never. So the fact that I got that, I was super happy and blessed because I was like, I have always been told they kick them out. And we weren't expecting that either. So I don't know if it was just like the way things happen and the tension, and I was like dying of the pain, and they were just like, you sit over there and don't move. And he just stayed quiet. He was just watching the whole time. But I feel like that was also like a mental help to just know that I had him there just in case. I don't know. I don't know for what, because it's not like he can do anything about it, but it just helped me. So then I got the epidural. It was smooth sailing all the way through. And then when you get the epidural, it's supposed to slow down your labor process, like dilation is what I'm trying to say. So when that happened, I was still dilating. It took a very long time to like get to 10 centimeters. So I guess I was like running out of the epidural, and I don't know, for whatever reason, they didn't give me more. Some people say that they give them like doses and you can like push it and whatever, but that was just not my case. So the time came to push. I was 10 centimeters and I start pushing, and I like, okay, it's fine, whatever, right? So I'm pushing, but then my contractions start to slow down. I ended up pushing for 2 hours, no, for 3 hours, but for 1 hour, like I didn't have contractions. So really I pushed for 2 hours, but it was 3 hours of like pushing, which was insane. Like to the point that my family got concerned because they were like, I was having a baby 2 or 3 hours ago, and they're like, what's happening? And then because of that, I think that the epidural started to like run out. So towards the end, I was feeling almost everything and I wanted to die. I really, really at the end, I had like what they call the ring of fire that literally feels like a lighter is burning you alive, which was like savage. And I almost kind of gave up. Like my doctor had to give me a kind of sturdy, firm like conversation, and she's like, you made it this far, like this is it, like there's no turning back, made it, like this is my pep talk, kind of yelled at me. And then I decided in that moment, I was like, all right, I'm almost all the way through, like the head was like out, and or not out, but it was like crowning, and I was like, okay, I just need to do this. I'm gonna die, and then like I'll wake up like tomorrow, like resuscitated or whatever, hopefully, and like my child will be fine, it'll be fine. So I gave it all I had, thought I was literally gonna die, and then she came out, and instantly when she came out was like what everyone talks about, that release. And I had no pain, no burning, like it was perfectly fine. And then they put it on my chest, and then I lost it. I was like crying, bawling. I was like, oh my God, like the hormones in you and around, it's like insane. And it was just beautiful. It was like a great, beautiful moment. It was just Nico and I alone in the delivery. That's how I chose for it to be. I just wanted to have peace of mind. I didn't want any stress or anxiety. I needed him. He is like my rock. He's super calm, and I'm more like anxious and like stressed. So I really just wanted someone that was going to balance me out, and I didn't want like a lot of commotion, a lot of opinions, and a lot of things in the room. ¿Qué pasó? Sí, mama. All of our family was out in the lobby for like hours and hours and hours waiting to see us. They couldn't even see us because by the time she was born, it was 10 o'clock. So like imagine I got into the hospital at 5 a.m. and she gave birth, and I gave birth to her at 10 p.m. I was 22 hours in labor, which is insanity. I didn't eat anything. They didn't let me eat or drink anything. It was a bit much. The crazy thing now too is that I've heard once your water breaks, like the first pregnancy, it's almost super high percentage that it's gonna break every other pregnancy, which kind of sucks because clearly like my water broke, but then I had like really slow, like I dilated really slowly, and I ended up needing Pitocin. So like now I'm kind of like all over the place in my opinions. Like if my water breaks and I'm in there and like I'm not dilating quickly enough, I know the process is just going to be Pitocin, epidural, like let's do this. So I'm not going to go through the pain for no reason. But if, and I say this now, ask me when I'm pregnant again, but if my water breaks, or if it doesn't break, but I start dilating quickly and I don't need Pitocin or I don't need to be induced, I 100% want to try again for natural, because everyone that I know has told me and has had the experiences of natural with Pitocin and without, it's totally different. They're like the amount of pain that you feel on Pitocin versus a natural birth is like triple more, like it's 3 times more painful, which is crazy because obviously childbirth is painful, but it just makes me more aware of like, wait, can I actually do it? Can I handle it? At the time I was like, there's no way. But again, I think it's because really I was on Pitocin. Again, everyone's pain tolerance is super different. Everyone takes all of that super different. Everyone wants different things out of their pregnancy. You need to just know yourself really well and what makes you happy, calm, and at peace. It's your body, it's your birthing story, it's your labor. I would say do what makes you happy, do your research. Because sometimes you can think you want something, and then when you learn about it, you're like, oh, maybe I don't want to do that. And also be open, right? Because things happen and you can end up in a C-section, and I'm aware of that. Like, that's something I didn't want. There's women that maybe you want a C-section, you know that. Just be more aware that things can go differently, and it may not always be what you want. But be educated enough so that you can make decisions as things change, and you can advocate for yourself, and then within the things you don't want, you at least know how you want them to proceed. Because I've seen that to be the case in a lot of people's situations, and I think it's really sad sometimes when you just don't know or don't get to have those decisions. It's your body, and I think it's really important to know. Obviously, listen to your doctors, and that's why I say get educated, because that's the most important part. But basically, that was my journey. I did not tear, which is very, very rare. My doctor even told me, she's like, who are you? Like, you're like, no first-time moms don't tear. I'm going to tell you my theory of why, because everyone's like, oh, do this and do that so you don't tear and blah, blah, blah. And there's like all this hoopla. I feel like you can't control any of that. Everyone's body is different. And I really think that the only reason I didn't tear is because I was literally pushing actively for 2 hours with her head stuck in my canal for 2 hours. So she stretched me out like a rubber band, and like there was no need to tear because I was already stretched because she was in there for forever. Most women do not labor for, like, not labor, push for that long actively. So, which also I was exhausted because I was pushing for 2 hours. Like, I didn't think I was going to need that much strength. I also feel like with everything that I did, the only thing that I didn't give me as much information was the actual pushing part and how physically straining that is. So I recommend working out as much as possible during your pregnancy, obviously health wise, but also before getting pregnant, work on your core a ton, which I'm like trying to work on core now so that when I get pregnant again, whatever, I can be stronger, because I got tired. Like, and you have to like carry your own body weight with your legs and like all this stuff. It's a lot. Like, so I would definitely recommend like getting strong, because it takes a lot of like physical effort, and also resistant, like stamina exercise, because if you end up like me and you end up being there for a hot minute, like you're gonna get tired. So you want to be able to make sure you can handle like intense activity for a long time, is what I would say. But yeah, mama, what a crazy story. Mommy's, yeah, yeah. So because I ran I had my water broken for 22 hours. I actually started to run a fever a little bit right towards the end when I was pushing. The baby, thank God, she was not born with a fever, so everything was fine. They did keep her for 3 days. We stayed for 3 days instead of the 2 after a natural birth, because they wanted to make sure that she was fine, which she was. They did give me antibiotics after, just to make sure that I was fine as well and that I didn't get an infection. But basically, like, running the fever can happen because I was probably fighting something off since my water had been broken for so long. And it was 22 hours because the last 2 hours, like, again, I was pushing. If I would have passed more than those 2 hours, I would have been in the C-section. That would have been terrible. So it was crazy. But all in all, considering that it was long and kind of looked like dramatic and whatever, at the same time, it was like a very healthy, not normal, but a very healthy labor and delivery. So I was very gracious and happy with my experience. Yeah, mama. So then we go into like post having the baby. The first night was heaven. She slept. It was great. Well, not first night. I didn't sleep because it was already the next morning, and like I had to feed her every 2 hours. But overall, she was doing well, right? Every 2 hours she would nap. ¿Qué pasó, mama? ¿Qué pasó? But because it was already the next day and I basically had to keep her up, so I had only slept 2 hours since she was born, and then it was the morning, and then in the morning I was up the whole day. The second night hit me like a ton of bricks because no one had talked to me or explained how crazy cluster feeding is. This was beyond me. So she was like, learning to, she latched really well. She was eating already. My milk started to come in. It was still like colostrum, but it was coming in. So we were like in the good processes. She was having the right amount of pees and poops and wet diapers and all the things. So she was 100% healthy. But she started eating every 20 minutes for 1 hour. Of course, it's my first time breastfeeding. My boobs were like destroyed. I was in so much pain. It hurt so bad. People were like, oh, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, it doesn't hurt eventually once like you learn how to do it and it's all happening. But like in the hospital, all of those days it hurt. The first week it hurt. It was like, I don't care what anybody says. I'm not trying to scare you, but like it hurts. Like just if it didn't hurt you and you just latched and you were like, oh, this is, bless you. I'm so happy for you. Like that was not the case for me. So at this point I could not sleep because it was like she was just constantly eating, and they call that cluster feeding, and then it's normal, and basically it's supply and demand. So this is like the baby's trying to eat because she can't get enough, and you're trying to produce, and like your body produces more the more the baby's latched on, and you have to go through this. But when you have a lack of sleep, a lot of it also coincided with like the time that she was born, how long I was in labor. I didn't get to sleep at all in those 22 hours. It was a lot. So if I can recommend something, I'm like, try to sleep at some point of that labor and that delivery. Like if you can get some sleep, because cluster feeding is crazy. I also wanted to breastfeed, which was obviously that makes it more challenging and more work. Again, how and you manage and want to feed your baby, totally up to you. Each person's going to do what's best for them and their journey. But I strongly understand and recommend like a healthy mom equals a healthy baby. So whatever that means for you to be healthy, for your baby to be healthy, and your mind to be at ease and at peace with your decision, that's the most important. Because I, at that point, was losing it. And literally they make you sign this paper about like how you're feeling, your emotions. And I thought I was like super depressed. So I was like, I'm the worst mom ever. And they're like, no, they're like, she's fine. She's reacting all the right ways. Like this is normal. Her reactions are normal. Everything she's doing is normal. And I was like, yes, but why is she still starving? Like, why does she still want to eat? Like, I just felt so incapable, not enough. I felt like I wasn't being able to give my child everything she wanted. And Nico just kept reminding me literally every second. And he was like, you haven't slept. You haven't slept. You haven't slept. You haven't slept. At some point, I literally thought they were going to bring me a social worker because like they thought I was going to like be postpartum super crazy, like depressed. Because that's literally how I felt. And then I was able to finally sleep, and I slept 4 hours. And let me tell you something. As someone who used to be like, if I don't get 8 hours, I'm super grumpy. I love my sleep. Once you have a baby, your body totally changes and your hormones totally change. And there's something about it that just lets you go on and like sleep less and be okay. I slept 4 hours and I feel like I was ready to run a marathon again. I was like rejuvenated, fine. I was like, oh, I got this. Like, I just needed some sleep. Gordita, tú estás muy levantada en esa cuna. She's standing up, but she's like on her tippy tippies, leaning over. Yeah, sí, eso no se hace. Eso no se hace. Hay que tener cuidado, mamá. Hay que tener cuidado. So cluster feeding was insane. Once I managed and I slept, I felt better. Mind you, it was still tough. I was still in pain, all these things, but like sleeping just helped so much. And then everything was fine. We got cleared from the hospital and we got home. Once you got home, honestly, it just is so much more relaxing because you're home, so you feel more comfortable. People, nurses and doctors are walking in every like 5 milliseconds to check on you. That doesn't let you sleep either. Like you feel more comfortable in like your own space. So that was great. And that whole postpartum was a whole other journey. But honestly, this podcast feels like it's been very long. So I think that postpartum will be an entire other podcast. And we were able to get through PCOS, pregnancy, labor and delivery. And that's basically my story. I hope that was insightful. I hope my story can help you a little bit, get some insight on different possibilities and things to expect or what not to expect. Of course, like I said, again, everyone is so different. The more I talk to moms and their experiences, we've all had different experiences. And there's not really like one set way of doing anything. Everything is different. You just have to know what is going to work best for you and get educated and just make sure that you're advocating for yourself. I feel like that is the most important thing. Or have a partner or someone that can advocate for you as well. And remember that everyone's story is different. This is just my story, when I went through, and even the next time could be different. A lot of the moms that I talked to that have several kids have also said that all their labor stories are pretty different, and you never know what to expect. But just so that I feel like, for me at least, the more stories I heard, the more I was at ease to know different options and different possibilities and different outcomes. So I hope that my story can help you a little bit and can encourage you if you're somebody that is struggling with PCOS or some different other diagnosis with infertility or any issues like that. Just know that it may look gloom today, but your future is very bright, and things are not always as they seem, and you can be surprised and things can be completely unexpected, because I did not think I would get pregnant on the first try. So just hope that my story can just shine some light of possibilities, that anything is possible, and just have faith. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you follow me on Instagram if you don't, at Chic by V, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.